Rossi babes, welcome back to our channel and welcome to another video. If you're new here, my name is Charlize Bettis, and if you are new, I would love for you to stay and be a part of the Rossi family and subscribe to our channel down below, as well as turning on our post notifications so you can be notified every time we post a new video and you don't miss any uploads. And if you're already part of the Rossi family, then welcome back. I will be showing you how to apply nail tips and also how to find the right sizes for your nails. And I will also be showing you how to build the structure of your nail, or what you can call an apex when using dip powder. And if you're like, what the heck is an apex? I've never heard of that. Then don't worry, because I'm here to explain what it is exactly and why it's good to have, especially when using nail tips. An apex is gonna build structure to where your nail tip and the natural nail meet. And this is just gonna strengthen your nail in order to prevent it from breaking if you were to accidentally hit it on something. And it's also gonna add that nice perfect curve to your nail, so that way they don't look so flat on the side. Unless that is of course your preference, then you can totally skip the apex method. But I personally prefer my nails to have that little curve or an apex rather than having a flat nail. So the apex method that I will be sharing and showing y'all today is the one that I always do and is the one I prefer to do, because it is so simple and it's not time consuming. Because you don't want to spend too much time on just building an apex when you still have to apply color. So I feel like this method just works really well and isn't so time consuming and is not hard at all and super beginner friendly. But before we get into the tutorial, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up down below. And now let's go ahead and get started. Alright Rossi babes, so just like we would with any other nail application, we're going to start off by prepping our natural nail and just gently pushing back our cuticle and removing any dead skin. Not only is this going to prevent lifting, but it's also going to help prevent dip powder from getting onto the cuticle area. So next, before applying our nail tips, I'm just going to be taking my Rossi 150 edge nail file and using this to file down the length of my natural nail just a little bit. This step is your preference and you do not have to file your nail down if you don't want to. I sometimes like to let my natural nails grow out when I use nail tips, so therefore I sometimes skip this step. Now that our nails are prepped, we're ready to start applying our nail tips. When applying nail tips, you want to make sure that it aligns perfectly with the sidewalls of your natural nail. So for example, this one does fit big because it does not align perfectly, so you want to avoid that. And you also don't want it to fit too small just like this one, because if not, it can pop off or just lift off. As you can tell, it doesn't align with my sidewall perfectly, so this is another thing to avoid when applying nail tips. And if you have trouble finding your correct size, you can always file down the sidewalls of the nail tip to better fit your natural nail. And this is how a proper nail tip should fit onto our natural nail, which aligns perfectly with our sidewalls. Before we start applying our nail tips, we're first going to be taking our Rossi Step 1 primer and just applying this to where we'll be applying the nail tip, which would be at the very top of your nail. And by priming this area, we're just going to be removing any excess oils, which is going to make sure that our nail tips are going to glue properly onto our natural nail and not pop off. We're now ready to start applying our nail tips, and just a little tip, if you didn't know, you can use our Step 2 base coat. So now I'm going to be applying a small amount of the base coat to the very tip of our natural nail, and then very quickly applying our nail tip, making sure that it is straight and not crooked. And then I will be holding that down against my natural nail for about 30 seconds until it's completely dry. And if you happen to accidentally glue on your nail tip crooked, don't worry, because it's an easy fix. Just don't tear off the nail tip. Instead, soak it in acetone. So I like to first just cut down the nail tip as short as it can get. And then pour a little amount of acetone into a bowl and just soak your nail for about 5 to 10 minutes or until you find it easy enough to take off. So as you can see, the nail tip is turning white because it is starting to soften, meaning it's going to be easy to take off. So now that it's soft, it's safe enough to scrape off without damaging your natural nail. And you're then ready to reapply your nail tip. So we now have our first nail tip on, and now if you don't want to apply the base directly to your nail, you can also apply it to the inside of the nail tip. And as you apply your nail tips, you want to make sure that you do apply pressure to the nail tip as you hold it down against your natural nail to avoid any air bubbles. So I will now be applying the nail tips onto the rest of my nails. And before the glue is dried down, you can also pinch the sidewalls of the nail tip against your natural nail just to make sure that they're glued down in each corner, because if not, that can cause lifting as well. And when using either nail glue or your step 2 base coat, you want to keep in mind that a little goes a long way, because applying too much can actually make it harder for the nail tip to stick onto your natural nail. So this is how the nail tips look now that we have them applied, and they are a little too long for my preference, so let's go ahead and cut them down. So I'm going to be cutting my nails down to a medium length using my straight edge nail clippers, and of course this step is totally your preference and whether you want to do short, medium, or long nails. So I now have my nail tips cut down to a medium length, which is my preference. So now this next step saves me so much time when it comes to shaping my nail tips, so I like to take that same straight edge nail clipper and just use it to cut a little bit of the sides of the nail tip off. It's always best to cut a little at a time off of the side wall of the nail tip, just to make sure that you don't accidentally cut too much off the first time, which might ruin your nail shape. You also don't have to do this every time, it just depends on what nail shape you're going for. So for example, I'm going to be doing a squared nail shape, so it just saves so much time when it comes down to filing. So now I'm going to be taking my nail file and just perfecting the shape a little bit more and filing the side walls of the nail tips just like this to really get that squared shape. And since we already cut a little bit off of the side walls, there's not really much to file but more just perfecting the shape. And when using nail tips, when I think I have my perfect shape, I always like to make it a little bit more narrow than I would like, just because dip powder will naturally add kind of that thickness to your nail, so it can sometimes cause you to lose that perfect nail shape that you had. And then I'm just filing the top of the nail tip just to make sure that it is even, and I'm also still leaving a little extra length just because since we are going to be doing more shaping and filing after we have our dip powder application, we want to make sure that we didn't lose the nail length that we wanted. So I just like to always leave it a little bit longer just in case. So we now have our nail tips glued on and shaped. So now we're going to be doing one more step before we apply our dip powder. So if you can see here, that nail tip line that comes in contact with my natural nail does kind of stick up a little bit and has a thick bulge. So therefore we do need to file that down so we can have a smooth dip powder application and not have a bump right in the middle of our nail. This is such a common step that a lot of people miss when applying nail tips and doing dip powder. This will cause a bump in the middle of the nail, which can be hard to file. That's one of the mistakes that I used to make when I first started doing dip powder nails with nail tips, which would cause them to come out bumpy and uneven. So this is one of the most important steps if you are planning to use nail tips with dip powder. And as I'm blending in that nail tip line with my natural nail, I also like to file my nail just because we are also going to be prepping our nails for the dip powder, which one of the steps is removing the shine from your natural nail. So I just like to do both of these steps while blending in this nail tip line. So I now have that nail tip line blended into my natural nail, and this is how it looks now. It looks very fleshed, and I also like to run my finger over my nail just to make sure that it is smooth and that there is no bumps that I miss. So now we're finally moving on to building an apex using our dip powder. So just like we would with any dip powder application, we're going to be taking our step 1 primer and just applying this to the natural nail. We're not going to be applying this to the nail tip. This is going to dehydrate our nail and just remove any excess oils that may cause the dip powder to not stick properly. And as an example, here's a nail without an apex versus a nail with an apex. So to build our apex, I like to take a clear dip powder. I like for the powder to have no color, and making sure to either stir or shake your powder just to get rid of any clumps that may get in the way when applying the dip powder. And we're also going to be taking our step 2 base coat, which is going to make the dip powder stick to our nail. To start our apex, I like to first take the base coat and apply it where the nail tip and the natural nail meet, and immediately dip into our clear dip powder at a 45-degree angle. And letting that powder dry for about 30 seconds before wiping it off with a brush. You want to make sure that it's always completely dry, because if not, it can cause the dip powder to crumble up and just move everything around. So this is how our nail looks after the first dip into the clear, so now we'll be doing that to the rest of our nails. And the reason I use a clear dip powder when building an apex is because you can easily file off any dip powder color you have in order to change your set, rather than soaking off an acetone every time you want to change your colors. And just a side note, if you are someone that experiences dip flu, which is basically allergy-like symptoms after using dip liquids, then I do recommend using a mask or working in a well-ventilated area to prevent this. So this is how the nails look so far with the first dip of clear, and this is how the nail looks from the side. So far you can't really see the apex just yet, but we are going to be building that up with our next couple of dips. So for my second dip into my clear dip powder, I'm going to be taking my base coat and just applying it a little bit below where we first applied it, so to about half of the nail. And with our second dip, you'll be able to start seeing the apex form. So I'm then going to be dipping my nail into my clear powder at a 45-degree angle and waiting about 30 seconds before wiping away any excess powder. And then repeating that step to the rest of my nails. So this is now how the second dip into our clear looks, and this is how my nail looks from the side. So now for our third and final dip into our clear, I'm going to be taking our base coat and this time applying it to about 3/4 of the nail. And then dipping into my clear powder at a 45-degree angle. And repeating that step to the rest of my nails. So we now have our 3 dips into our clear dip powder, which means we now have an apex, and this is how my nails look from the side, which does have a slight curve, meaning that there is an apex. So this is how we want our nails to look after our 3 dips, and like I said, this method is pretty simple, so it is so easy to achieve. So now we're ready for some color. For our solid shade, I will be taking the shade DP742, which is going to be such a pretty soft pink, and then I will also be taking the glitter shade Paris Lights, which is going to be just a silver sparkly color. And of course, either mixing or shaking your powders just to make sure that there's no clumps when we apply the powder. So we're just going to be applying our dip powder as we normally would. Even though we do have an apex, nothing really changes for this part. So I'm going to be taking my base coat and applying it to 3/4 of the nail first, and then dipping my nail into the powder at a 45-degree angle and waiting about 30 seconds until it's completely dry before wiping away any excess powder with a brush. And you'll then want to repeat those steps to the rest of your nails. So for our ring finger, I will be switching to the shade Paris Nights, and I will be still applying the base to 3/4 of the nail and then dipping into our powder at a 45-degree angle. So now to build this color up, I will be taking a second layer of our color and just applying my base coat, this time a hairline away from the cuticle area. And just a tip, while the base is still wet, you can always take a toothpick just to get that perfect cuticle line, and also just to clean up any that may have gotten on your skin accidentally, and then taking our powder brush to wipe off any excess powder. And of course, repeating those steps to the rest of our nails. So it is now time to encapsulate our nails now that we have all of our color on. So I'm going to be taking my base coat and applying it all over the nail and just pouring my clear dip powder onto the base. And encapsulating your nails in clear is just going to ensure that the color and the glitter we applied is going to stay protected when we start filing. Now that we have all of our nails encapsulated, we now have to apply our step 3 activator in order to harden all of the dip powder layers. And then allowing our activator to air dry for approximately 1 minute. Now that our activator is completely dried, I will be taking our Rossi 150 edge nail file and using this to fix the shape of my nails and just really perfect everything. After I have my nails shaped how I want, I'm then going to be taking the nail file and just filing over the nail like this just to buff them out and make sure that they are smooth and that there's no bumps. So these are the nails filed and buffed out, and now we just have to apply our activator one more time before we apply our step 4 top coat. And then allowing that to air dry for a minute. After the activator is completely dried, before we go in with our step 4 top coat, I'm going to be taking a lint-free wipe with some alcohol and wiping my nails with it just to avoid cross-contamination of our step 4 top coat with the activator, which can cause the brush to harden. So we're now going to be applying our step 4 top coat, and I'm just going to be applying one thin layer of this first. And allowing that first layer of top coat to dry for 2 minutes. And after the first layer of top coat is completely dry, I'm then going to be taking a second layer of the top coat just to give me that extra glossy finish to the nails. And once again allowing that to air dry for 2 minutes or until completely dry. And lastly, applying our Honey Peach Cuticle Oil to nourish and hydrate the cuticle area. And now we're all done, and this is how my nail looks from the side using the Apex method, which as you can see isn't too thick, but it will be thick enough to add strength to the nail. So that completes today's tutorial, and I really hope y'all found today's video helpful and that you now know how to properly apply and size your nail tips, and that you also know how to build a structure or an apex when using your nail tips. So of course, before leaving today's video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel down below and turn on our post notifications, as well as give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to check us out on our social medias down below, because you might just find your next manicure inspo. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and we will talk to y'all in our next video. Bye, Rossi babes!